about the course. This is the 589, the Specialized Fire Behavior Theory and Applications. This course actually was born out of what used to be the Wildland Fire Behavior Specialist course. So for the longest time, we had the S490, or the Advanced Wildland Fire Behavior, but we didn't, that was it. So around 1995, they decided that, okay, we need something more. And so they developed this course. The first delivery was in 1996, and it was fairly broad in that the target was anyone who's going to be predicting fire behavior. The course ran pretty much every year up until 2002, and then they flipped to a biannual delivery. So there are literally hundreds of people at this point that have gone through this course, but not everyone takes the course to be an FBAN. In Alberta, our ignition specialists are required to have it. Other people in line and operations functions and planning functions also find utility in taking the course. And you could hear from the people that are on the course now that we come from a lot of different backgrounds. Everyone's going to bring a different skill set, a different set of experience to the course. And I think that's one of the nice things about a course like this, being national and being as large as it is, that it affords us the opportunity to learn something from someone else, from somewhere else, whether that's just a geography or a jurisdiction. Over the course of since 1996, there have been a couple of revamps of what the course was. The course was a classroom delivery, 2 weeks, but there were a couple of issues with actually that's the wrong way to couch it, but there were opportunities to improve the course. So in 2021, they kind of blew it up. They took the existing material and they split it between 2 modules. And in 2021, we were still referring to them as modules. So module A was this specialized fire behavior theory and applications. It was designed to be delivered as a hybrid course, so synchronous and asynchronous. So a little bit like this, where we all have to be here at the same time in the same place, and a little bit that is self-paced. Where the original course was 2 weeks through the weekend, I think we got 1 week off, or 1 day off over the roughly 2 weeks. This course is sort of every other day, roughly, over the course of 3 weeks. And it's usually only the core of the day. So trying to increase accessibility to the course, reduce travel, reduce time commitments, and give people a little bit more of an opportunity to manage their learning. The other module was module B. That is the operational FBAN skills and calculations. If you're interested in becoming an FBAN, this is sort of required. This is the hands-on skills. The theory and applications can be applied to a lot of different roles, but the skills and calculations is really focused on the FBAN. So it's a week of in-person classroom training. It's scheduled for this February in Hinton. And then we had Module C. Module C didn't include much content from the original course, so it was largely a brand new course. It was the Advanced Tools for Wildland Modeling and Forecasting, and they had their first delivery this spring. That course was also set up like the 589 as a hybrid course. So a little bit of some live sessions, and then also some self-paced learning. So in 2021, that was the very first delivery of this course as it stands, like on Canvas, and with the material that we'll be working with today, with a couple of revisions. In that delivery, there was about 20 hours of live sessions and about 50 hours of self-paced work, is what it worked out to, based on the feedback that we got from the students. So again, wanting to talk about the delivery. So the synchronous, the same time, same place, are our live lectures. The live lectures, just because we have people from across the country, the core period is kind of between 11 o'clock and 3 o'clock. That way, no one has to get up too early or stay too late, no matter where you are in the country. And then there's the asynchronous pieces. Those are the materials that you can access at your own pace. You can interact with your group as however you see fit. That's how the assignments, any of the discussions, and the quizzes will be handled. So because this is an online course, there's just a couple of things that we want to make sure that we touch on. The first one is to stay organized. There's a lot of course material, so you want to make sure that you are keeping on top of the schedule. So make sure that you don't miss any deadlines, to make sure that you're not scrambling to do something the night before because you didn't realize it was due tomorrow. So really want to spend some time in Canvas, maybe go into Canvas on a pretty regular basis, just so that you don't lose sight of sort of what's going on. Because one of the hazards with doing a remote course like this is we all have jobs that we're trying to do on top of this course, and that gets to be a real challenge. What we've found, or what we've recommended to folks, is make time to study. Whether that's you block off certain time in your schedule or however you want to do that, but you should probably plan to spend anywhere between 15 to 20 hours on coursework in any given week. The other thing is to get as much as you can out of this course. We really want folks to actively participate. So don't make the instructors ask, like if an instructor puts a question to the group, don't sit back on your heels, but actually engage in the conversation. And when there are these discussion assignments, also actively participate in those. To get full credit for those discussions, you actually have to make a meaningful contribution. So a thumbs up or, yeah, that's a great idea, isn't really enough to get you full marks on those projects. So really, we're all adult learners. So to get the most out of this is really on you. You've got to take the ownership. You've got to manage your time. You've got to manage how engaged you are with the material. But if you really are interested in being in doing better fire behavior predictions and forecasts, then it's really on you to take the time to squeeze as much out of this course, out of the cadre, out of the other students as you can. And that's sort of that last point, that the leveraging the network. There are folks on this call that have a ton of experience. They have a ton of operational experience, planning, fire behavior, emergency management. So that's whether you're talking about the instructors, the folks that are going to be working as mentors, or even the other students. There is a ton of experience in this course. So, use that to your advantage. Ask questions. If we've got somebody from the East Coast, maybe ask about a fuel type you've never worked in. More and more, and we're seeing this, well, everyone's seeing it now, is we are moving all over the country. Now we're starting to move all over the globe. In 2019, a whole whack of us went over to Australia. So building that network, making those connections, and then also just being curious about somebody else's backyard will also contribute to you getting something out of this. A little bit about online etiquette. We're going to ask that you try to log in earlier rather than later in case you have any audio or video issues that we need to troubleshoot. If you're not speaking, just mute your microphone, just so it isn't a distractor for whoever's presenting. And if you have questions, include them in the chat. That's a nice way for us to keep track of questions. So if in the event that we can't address the question during the session, we can put it in the parking lot and bring an answer back at a later time. So it just helps us manage the Q&A a little bit better. And so the last piece before I move on to the next piece is this idea about mentoring. So this delivery, we have set up mentors for each of the groups. We have 8 groups that range from 4 to 5 people per group. And the idea behind the mentor is it's not just that's the only person you can talk to. You can talk to anyone on the cadre, anyone in the class. You can talk to people back in your home unit. The idea of the mentor is just that one window. If you have a question about the course, if you have a question about what the expectations are around a particular assignment or discussion, it's just that one window. Because the other thing that we're if one person has a question, chances are a lot of people have that same question. So again, we're trying to minimize the, okay, well, 30 people are going to ask Richard a question on venting. It's like, no, we'll collect the question and then sorry, now I'm rambling, but yeah, I guess that's the intent. Whether it's asking thought-provoking questions, being that sounding board, if you want to say, okay, am I doing this right? Or, how does this sound? That's what we're there for. Basically, we're there to help you be a success. So we're not spying on you. We're not taking notes. We are there as a resource for you to use. If you don't need us and we sit back and we just watch you guys do your thing, that's great too. But just know that each group has been assigned a mentor. The other piece is throughout the course calendar, there are office hours. Office hours on Monday and Tuesday are a little bit different. They're later in the day, but generally on Wednesdays and Thursdays between 1 o'clock and 5 o'clock, we have we have office hours set. So if the previous day you had there was a presentation, and when you reviewed the material, there was something that came out and you had a question, that's an opportunity because whoever I presented will be available during office hours to answer those questions, as well as the mentors or anyone else. So that's kind of it for that piece. Because I can't see questions. I see there's something in the chat.
Hey, Tanya, just to jump in, I think you mentioned office hours Wednesday and Thursday we're at.
Oh,
I think that's Wednesday and Friday is what you meant, eh? The days when we don't have the lectures. Yeah.
Yes, sorry. Wednesday and Friday. All right, so the next piece is just to have a look in Canvas and draw out a couple of things. Sorry. Shoot.
Maybe while you're doing that, I'll just jump
Sure.
in. I hope you don't mind. Just a couple things. Canvas, the very top of the course, has an announcements tab, which Tanya's going to show. And if this course is like the last one, some things will probably change. And so it's a good idea to check that announcements at the beginning of every week, because occasionally stuff will get posted. I just wanted to mention we are making an effort to record all the live sessions. And we have a private YouTube channel. This was fairly effective last course. So if whatever reason you kind of space out or whatever, and you kind of missed a discussion that was really interesting, it will be accessible. The downside is it takes a long time to sort of search through video files for reference. So, videos are great if you want to rewatch part or the whole course someday, but it's not great if you're on a fire and you want reference materials, or if you want a quick cheat sheet or something. So just bear that in mind. But the intent is for it to exist in perpetuity, and it's private, it's unlisted. There's good and bad to that. Anyway, yeah, it's the actual live course, which, like my speaking right now, will be recorded and is accessible, which is great. It also means we have to be a little bit discreet with who we forward the links to, because anyone with the link can access the videos. Everyone's face is on camera. Everyone's questions will also be recorded. If you have major privacy concerns and don't want that, you're free to ask questions in another way, to, email or through Canvas. But yeah, so that's the one thing with recordings. The only other thing I noted was that the way this is set up, looks like Tanya's using this again, which is great, is that it'll be the same Teams link. So you just click on the calendar item for the Teams every day for the lectures, but it's actually the same link. So that's sort of handy. The chat should continue from the previous session, and all that will be retained. So just a little piece that for navigation. Sorry, Tanya, not trying to steal thunder, just a couple things.
No. You go right ahead. Okay. Anything else? Dan?
Oh yeah, and as for the participation, some instructors like to call on individuals kind of at random just to sort of force a little bit of engagement. So you're expected. Like when we were in person, you guys who are taking 590 will be there in Hinton, and you can get kind of called out from the classroom, but it's a little bit less obvious here. So occasionally people may get picked on, to questions as such. So hopefully everyone's staying awake and the cameras help. But yeah, you're expected to be at the lectures and participating. So that may happen. Bear in mind. I just see in the chat, is there a contact person for clarification for French participants? OK, alors je parle français aussi pour les francophones. S'il y a des questions, vous voulez une discussion en français, nous n'avons pas une règle pour ce cours. So I'm just saying we don't have an actual French language policy for this course, I understand. And we used to have a little more French capability in the instructors. I'm not great. I do what I can, but if we want, we can arrange some specific. OK, s'il y a l'intérêt, on peut organiser des discussions en français pour ceux qui préfèrent ça. Okay, I'll turn it back over to Tanya.
All right. So when you log into Canvas, this is what your screen is going to look like, or this is the student screen. It's going to look a little bit different than what the cadre has access to, just because we can work in the background. So this is going to be when you first go in, when you first go in, you pick your course. This is going to bring you to the home page. And there's just a couple of things that I wanted to highlight. Like, you can go in there and navigate however you see fit. So on the syllabus, so this is the way the course is outlined. You can see how the assignments are weighted and what they're worth. You can, if you click on any of these, so if I'm going to click on this presentation, it's going to bring me to the calendar. And then it's also going to open the link. So when Dan talked about to join the meeting, and certainly for anyone that's, if you made it to the call, you figured it out. You can join the meeting link. And to Dan's point, like, for all the office hours, for all the live presentations, it is the same link. So the chat will continue. We're only recording the live sessions and only as they are being delivered. So if we take a half-hour break for, just a bio break, then we'll cut the recordings, but we will not be recording office hours. So there's just that piece as far as navigating. And then there are modules. You can see how the course is sort of broken up. So as far as today, the course introduction piece, there was the case study submission. Everyone was supposed to load them onto the CIFC SharePoint site by 9 o'clock this morning. There are a couple of pieces for you to review. So let's just go to those right now. So if you go to pages, these are the pieces. The only thing that's marked as to do is the code of conduct. So you want to make sure that you give that a look in terms of what is acceptable and what is unacceptable in terms of behavior for this course, and generally for all courses. Then there's also a little blurb about the course. There is the learning objectives. So for each of the 3 units, there is Unit 1, which is safety and fire behavior prediction, Unit 2, which is complex environments, and Unit 3 is characteristics of extreme fire behavior. Each of those have learning objectives and key concepts identified. And then there's a page on the course cadre. So for the pictures should populate when you access it, but a little bio on each of the members of the cadre. And then the last piece is a link to some tips and tricks for using Canvas. It's probably worthwhile if this is the first time navigating on this learning platform, just to understand how to navigate, like how to upload files and that sort of thing. So you can see as part of this course introduction, oh, actually, let me just see here. Okay. Right. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the calendar. So when you're in the calendar, there's a sort of little hint too in terms of what it is that you're looking at. So anything with a calendar is going to be one of our live sessions. Anything with these 2 little chat bubbles are going to be an assignment, but it's an assignment that's a discussion. So basically you have to interact or engage with others, whether that's the group at large for the hello, my name is, or your assigned group in the get to know your group assignment. The other one is anywhere you see this little pencil, that is an assignment. So you've got to go in and it'll tell you what it is that you're supposed to do. Shoot. It'll provide directions on what it is that you're supposed to do, as well as when that assignment is due. So that's about that. If you're interested in who the people are in the course, you can look by role. So the 37 students, 11 teachers, and 1 TA or mentor. If you want to actually look at what the assignments are, oh, this was actually the one I was going to, but these are your assignments. And there's a couple of things to note. Again, the chat bubbles, the pencil, and then there's the rocket ship. So anytime you see a rocket ship, that's going to be a quiz. Now, when you open up the assignments, it talks. Ooh, good. Actually, I haven't been in there, so I'm going to read this later and see what everyone had to say. Let me go down here a little bit further. Okay, so as an example, anything in Unit 1, because this is the first week of the course, is available. It was available, and it's available until the end of the course, which is December 2nd. Unit 2, which is going to start next week, the material in there is not available until the start of next week, the 18th. So even though you'll see it, you won't be able to access it. The other thing that you want to look at when you're looking at assignments is how much each of these assignments are worth. So they are they have different weights. Sorry, I'm just going to look at one more thing here. Then there are the quizzes. When we talk about the quizzes, the thing to note is that, again, they'll be available for a certain amount of time. We're working on the honor system. So you could cheat and you could Google and you could phone a friend, But the idea is we're all adults here. The idea is we want to get better at what it is that we're doing. So if you're cheating, your heart's not in it. And probably the bigger issue is, okay, you can fake it in the course, but when you actually get out into the field, you can't fake it. So if you didn't learn anything in the course because you took a shortcut, that's going to burn you in the end. So we're going to trust that you guys want to get it. You want to get as much out of this course as you can. And so you're going to, do the right thing. And in the code of conduct, it sort of talks about plagiarism and cheating. So that's, if you're caught, that's a way to get turfed out of the course too. So when you look at grades, again, you can see which ones are classified as a discussion and which are classified as an assignment. So when you add up all the assignments, it's still only worth 10% of your final grade. Like all the discussions, worth 10% of your final grade. So what we're really driving for is, certainly with the discussions, is that's your opportunity to participate. Like that's where we're really going to be looking for you to be engaged with the course and with the material. When we talk about the exams and we talk about the quizzes, a passing mark is 65, but a 70% is required to pass the course overall. So to actually get the certificate, you have to achieve an overall grade of 70%. So we already looked at pages. The last thing to sort of look at is files. So in files, we have the binder. The binder is actually the binder material that was put together for 2021. It hasn't been updated yet. I'm in the process of doing that now. There are some edits to the weather section, but that's the only one with any significant changes. The course information, it really is just the exact same thing that's on pages. It's just the first go round, there's backup. And then because you can't download anything from pages. So at least here you can download these pieces. And the last part is references. So there are files in the root folder of references. Then there are folders that speak specifically to the danger rating system and then to weather. So these aren't necessarily things that are going to be used in assignments or anything like that. It's more, if you're an F band, you're going to start building up your library if you haven't already. It's like, here's some really good articles, here's some really good guides, these are some job aids, and you create your own library. And so these are some things that you might want to consider adding if you don't already have them in your own library. I think that was kind of it. Probably the last thing for folks is actually maybe I'll get at a student view so you can, because you can see. So if I go to my account, go to settings. For anyone here, you want to go in and update your time zone, and that way there won't be any confusion in terms of, okay, well, what like everything will be set to your time zone, as opposed to having, okay, is mountain time 2 hours behind or 2 hours ahead or 1 hour behind? So that's probably one thing that I would suggest to do today. I think that is about it for that piece. Does anyone have any questions about Canvas at this point? You do have two discussion pieces that are due by end of day today. There's the hello, your name is, which we already saw some people have already put something in there. And then there's the get to know your group. That's where you're talking to your group directly. And I know that Chris had sent an email encouraging folks to do that, but if you could also engage in that conversation on Canvas, that would be great, because then we have a record of it. Okay, so any comments, questions from folks at this point? How do you submit your answers? There is a submit button. And so depending on how the assignment is set up, like for the assignments, it could be a text entry, so there'll be a text box. It could be a recording or a file upload. So if, say, you do something in PowerPoint or you do something in Microsoft Word, you can upload the file. So depending on the assignment, it'll dictate how to submit or what's permissible as a submission. So that'll be included in the instructions for assignments. Any other questions? All right, so
Tanya,
yes.
I got just a couple quick questions. I think there's two mentors who are not on today. Is that okay? You know that? Okay. So they're on top of everything. And do we have instructor or cadre meetings? Maybe I'll do that separately by email or something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
We'll do that
Okay.
separately. Anything else? Nope. Okay, so that is sort of the intro part. The next piece is a bit of a primer, a discussion, or not a discussion, I suppose, but a presentation to sorry, I was up late last night, so it's like not everything is firing right now, or not as quickly as it should. Okay, so I'll stop sharing that. So the next PowerPoint, and I promise this won't be a death by PowerPoint. It's just this helps me keep my thoughts on track because I tend to ramble and go on tangents. Okay, so this is a presentation and this presentation has been around for a long, long time. It was initially put together by Marty Alexander when Marty Alexander, or like a version of this, by Marty Alexander when he was on the cadre. And then even up to 2021, the last delivery, Dana Hicks had done the same sort of presentation. And again, it's not that there's anything in here that you really want to remember. It's mostly just to get us starting to think about fire behavior prediction. So again, this is more of a primer. So whenever we think about the factors that influence fire behavior, there are a lot. So it goes beyond just the fire behavior triangle. And so with everything that you add, it just adds that complexity when we start talking about, okay, well, how are we going to forecast? How are we going to predict? There's a lot of things that we're going to try to cover or to address in some way, whether by saying, okay, we're going to ignore that, and that's an assumption, or it's going to be included, but it's only going to be included within these range of variables. So you can see that, and you guys know it because there's a lot of experience in the room or on the call, that fire behavior can be quite complex. So about 50 years ago, Barrows had put together this diagram as a way, or this flow chart as a way of illustrating the process for judging fire behavior. And so he said, basically, there are 5 steps. So the first is just the basic knowledge, like fire burns, principles of combustion. The next is forest knowledge. So when they talk about forest knowledge, they're talking about basically our fire behavior triangle, right? Fuels, weather, and topography. Then the next step is looking at job aids and guides. So whether that's, the Red Book, the the FBP system, Red App, topo maps, any sort of imagery, raster files, like all the FBP fuel grid raster files, those pieces those computational tools and guides. The fourth step was this idea of actually understanding your situation. So it's all well and good to predict a bunch of stuff, but if that doesn't actually relate to your situation, it's not going to be of a whole lot of help. So this idea of step number 4 is actually doing the size up. So does the prediction, the forecast, does everything, all those pieces match your situation? And then ultimately it's the decision. What are you going to do? So in and again, this is 50 years old. So it was always about when, where, and how to control a fire. But the thing of it is, it's like, this is still really valid today. This is still how we go about thinking about fire behavior. But Marty and Miguel Cruz in 2013 had actually come up with another flowchart. And the idea behind this flowchart is really to highlight this idea or this link between the art and science of fire behavior prediction. So it's not all about the numbers. It's not all about the science. There are other pieces that have to be considered. So you have to couple what your practical knowledge is. So sort of like that basic knowledge, forest knowledge from the Barrows flowchart. But then you also need to incorporate your judgment and your experience, right? So what have you seen before? Have you worked in this fuel type? Have you seen, has the antecedent weather, is that the same fire environment that you've worked in before? Have you worked in this sort of topography? It's like, do you have those pieces sort of in your slide deck? And then the other piece is the computational models. So again, going back to Barrows' model, it's those aids and guides. So you can see that really the only thing that perhaps the Barrows flowchart didn't highlight was this judgment and experience. And that's the piece that I think particularly with this course that we really, really wanted to highlight is don't discount that, whether it's your experience or somebody else's. Like, just because somebody might not know the science behind why something did something, they made a valid observation, and that's a piece of information that you should be integrating into your process. Well, so now I'm going to ask a question, and this is again where I talked about when somebody presenting asks a question, it would be nice if people responded. You can, and because right now I can't see if somebody puts up their hand or if somebody has somebody unmutes. So this is a little bit of that online etiquette. But what are the practical outputs of fire behavior prediction? Like, why do we do fire behavior prediction? Like, well, actually, I shouldn't say not why, but, oh, sorry, go ahead.
How big will the fire be at the end of the day? Do you have enough hose?
Yep.
Firefighter safety.
Yep. And I guess think about what are the outputs? So I sort of misspoke when I asked the why, but what are the outputs? Like, when we talk about fire behavior prediction, what is included in that prediction? That would answer those questions.
How much time before it reaches that community?
Okay.
Rate of spread.
Rate of spread, for sure. Yep.
Intensity.
There's a bunch of answers in the chat too, Tanya. I don't know if you can open the chat or if you want someone to read them out, but there's a bunch of.
Yeah, if you could read them out, Dan, just because I can't see them.
Sure. So people have answered rate of spread, safety and resource forecasting, rate of spread and intensity, rate of spread, perimeter growth rates, establishing trigger points, also rate of spread distance and area, intensity class, do tactics match the current and expected fire behavior, HFI, they're rolling in, evacuation zones, lots of good ideas here. Will some fuel act as a holding feature, spotting potential.
Nice. So what we had was, right, and again, this isn't an exhaustive list, but I mean, you guys touched on all that, right? Like rate of spread, perimeter, intensity, difficulty of control, the type of resources that you'd be needed as it relates to safety. spotting. So yeah, I mean, you guys touched on all these things, right? And sort of and it all speaks to the other pieces that you talked about. It's like, okay, the resource allocation, are resources going to be safe? Are they going to be effective? So when we start talking about how does that translate into products and services when you're an FBAN, so there's the standard, the fire behavior forecast, there's fire growth projections, and those can be, you know, something that's hand bombed on the top or the hood of your truck, or that could be some sort of long-term spatial fire growth model. If you wanted to say, okay, if this fire is going to be free burning in the back 40 for the next month and a half, what is the spread potential on that fire? We contribute to safety messages. And so this is a little bit of a pet peeve, like the safety, depending on your agency, there's a safety message on the fire behavior forecast form. And the thing of it is, we're not talking about slip, trips, and falls. We're not talking about aviation hazards. The safety that we're talking about is specific to fire behavior. So are there, burned out routes? Are there ash pits? Those sorts of things. So those safety messages as they relate to fire behavior. We're also delivering briefings, operational briefings, whether that's for wildland fires or prescribed fires. We contribute to situation reports in terms of what did a fire do, sort of doing that. Like if you had a big fire run, you lost, say, perhaps you lost property or infrastructure, you have to go back and actually do an assessment in terms of, okay, well, what did we do? What did we miss? How do we account for what happened there? So those sorts of situation reports. You can develop and evaluate fuel management work. So if you are talking about doing fuel treatments around a community, it's like, okay, well, which fuels are you going to take? How much are you going to take? And it's the same for prescribed fire plans. Like if you wanted a mixed severity fire and somebody writes a prescribed fire prescription that's going to give you a stand replacing fire, then you probably need to modify your prescription so that it matches your desired fire effects. So these are, and again, this is not a wholesome list, but these are probably a lot, the bulk of the work when we start talking about products and services for FBANs. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the idea behind assumptions, limitations, and uncertainties. So we all start with assumptions. The assumptions are basically our limitations. The limitations of our understanding, not our understanding, are the limitations of whatever model we're working with, perhaps our own experience. And those limitations then lead to uncertainty. So there is no perfect model. There isn't any, I get it right every time. I know 100% that this is going to happen. So there is an inherent uncertainty whenever we start talking about fire behavior prediction. So an Australian researcher, Barrows, had sort of suggested that ops personnel base their expectations on of fire behavior largely on their experience and perhaps less on fire behavior guides. And I mean, it's a pretty common thing. It's the idea of recognition prime decision making. It's like, okay, I recognize this situation. The last time I encountered this situation, this happened. And so I think this will happen again. And so you make decisions based on what you've seen before, if it matches. Sorry, I'm just checking my notes because I want to make sure I don't skip something. But and that works in some instances because sometimes you're going to hit the ground running where you have a fire that's charging at a community and they want to know, is it going to hit the community by the end of the burning period? And so you don't have time, or you may not have time to do a big fancy Prometheus model or do some other, take a lot of time to do a detailed fire growth projection. It might be just a yes or no answer. And so in those instances where we have to make mission critical, time sensitive decisions, we rely on our experience, and we also rely on rules of thumb. And rules of thumb are great. Again, if you need to make a decision quickly, then that's great. It's a really good resource. The one thing, and it's again another pet peeve, is do you know where that rule of thumb came from? You know, if you can't cite a paper or an article or even a person that you can say, okay, that's where that came from, then you'd probably really want to use that rule of thumb with caution, because you don't know the conditions or the variables around how that rule of thumb was created. And there's all sorts of rules of thumb out there. And so again, I'm going to put it to the group just because I've been chatting for a few minutes. I'm interested in what some of the rules of thumb that you guys know of, use, or share with other folks. And anybody?
I have one. I don't actually use it, but I was in Oregon this year, and there was this guy from California, and he talked about this guy that he worked for many, many years. And I guess down there, one of the things this guy used to do is walk around. He would grab the ponderosa pine needles and he would bend them. And if they snapped, he was like, yeah, we're going to have a spicy day.
Nice. Anybody else have any rules of thumb, things that are scratched in the back of your red book? I do.
There's a few in the chat again, Tanya. So 30-30-30 rule, bad news bears.
Okay.
Safety zone sizing, temp RH wind speed, just giving some reading here. Clearly that's not quite a rule, but just some good variables. MC of fine fuels equals 101 minus FFMC. The rule, direct attack not effective at intensity class 5. And then the 10% rule of thumb for rate of spread from wind speed, Marty and Cruz.
Yeah,
that's what's in the chat.
Okay, great. So again, not during this course, but certainly in the 590, we do have a bit more of a discussion around decision traps and rules of thumb. And but yeah, again, just something to keep in mind. It's like, yeah, I get it. If you need to make a decision quickly, because you need to move something out of the way, then that's fine. But be cautious. And the fella that said be cautious is this fella called Gisborne. And it's just a really long quote, but basically it boils down to your experience does not include knowledge of all conditions. Like even if you've seen this before, did you remember that fire exactly right? Did you remember that the codes and indices, what the codes and indices were, what the wind was? Do you exactly remember what the fuel type was? Then it's not a one-to-one. It's not an apples to apples. It may be, plums to peaches, but it's not a perfect fit. So this speaks to this idea of being cautious in terms of trusting that recognition prime decision making, where you just leap in because it's like, oh yeah, I've seen this, I know what this is, I'm going to go ahead and jump in with both feet. So there are reasons. There's a lot of reasons for models, for model predictions to not match observed fire behavior, regardless of what the model, whatever model is used. And again, this is something that's been around for 50 years. This isn't something we decided when we started developing computer models. It's like when we talk about a model, the Red Book, which is a book and just some tables, is a model. It is a version of the FBP system. So regardless of the model, probably the three reasons that you'll see disagreement between what you forecasted or predicted and what you actually observed. So the first one, and what we just talked about or we alluded to, was this idea that the model doesn't apply to your situation. Okay, so you had a, I'm trying to think now of an example, but say you're talking about a C3 stand. So it's a modified C3, maybe, or a fire smart treatment. You've gone in and you've limbed and you've sanitized the forest floor. It's still a pine stand, but it's not a standard pine stand. So again, if you're trying to use a C3 model, it's not going to fit because it's not really applicable to the situation. It's sort of a round peg, square hole. The second one is the model's inherent inaccuracy. So a model is never a perfect fit for the real world. You have to sort of make shortcuts in order to make the model fit. So all models sort of fall short to varying degrees when we talk about their applicability. So there's some issues around the model's inherent inaccuracy. So it's like minor factors in the model might have been ignored to get to a simplified relationship. And then the last one is the model input data might be inaccurate. If you're talking about, you're taking fire behavior observations from the line, and they're giving it to you at 2-meter height, but the model input requires 10-meter height, but you didn't do the wind conversion. Maybe you were, and this would be a goofy one, but you took the temperature in, or I know, well, wind is a big one to always bugger up, because it's like, if you're taking wind speed, is it the 10-minute average or was it the peak? Was it, the wind speed in the last minute? So your input data is another source of problems or for disagreement. And I've got a question for you here. There's a paper that, and now Marty, I feel like if you look for papers on fire behavior that have Marty's name on it, it's like a list longer than my arm. So he did another one where they looked at the accuracy of model predictions. And so they looked at 49 spread models that had over 1,000 pairs of model outputs and observations. What do you think, how often, as a percentage, was there an exact match? I'm looking for a number. Anyone want to hazard a, say again?
20%.
Ooh.
30.
Wow. That they're accurate? Okay, you are very hopeful. Anybody else have any guesses?
Is 0 an option?
0 is an option. It's a, well, and you're the opposite end of the spectrum. It's like they're never right. So that paper revealed that in 3% of the cases, they were exactly right. But what they found overall from the project was that they deemed that for that study, 35% was considered an acceptable error. So Matt, you weren't far off in terms of, okay, what's acceptable in terms of when we start making some of these considerations. Does anyone, there is a disclaimer in the Red Book in terms of a plus or minus. Does anyone know what that percentage is or remember what that percentage is?
20%?
Yeah, 20%. So again, the models that we're working with aren't perfect. And so our predictions aren't going to be perfect. When we talk about, certainly when we're talking about the input data, as you can imagine, or as you know, that there's certain parameters impact fire behavior. And so like the wind speed, okay, is it at the right height? Is it for the right duration? The dead fuel moisture. So if, you know, you don't overwinter your drought code and you reset it to 15 every year, is that actually accurate? You know, should you be overwintering your drought code? Slope steepness, when you talk about slope, it's never a plane. It's never, okay, that's 20% from top to bottom. There's gullies and there's dips and there's plateaus. And so there might be a lot of variability in that single slope, but you know, you pick a percentage, you know, or unless there's a major break, it's like, okay, for the lower third, I'm going to use this slope, and then for the upper 2/3, I'm going to use this slope. But again, that's another source of error. And the problem is that there isn't a linear relationship between data and output. And so again, and this is one of the things that whenever I'm talking to a new FBAN is you have to be really comfortable with being wrong. And I mean, hopefully you're not horribly wrong, but you have to be comfortable with not getting it exactly right every time. And that doesn't necessarily make you a bad FBAN. And now we'll talk about sort of why. So we talked about why models don't match observations. This one talks, or these assumptions, these three sets of assumptions deal with your fire behavior prediction, sources of error in your prediction. So not the model, but your prediction. Anyone want to hazard a guess at what one of them or two of them might be?
Personal biases.
Yeah, that's a big one. Anything else? Anyone else? Anybody that's ever done a fire behavior prediction is always bad mouthing somebody. Who are we always bad mouthing?
The weather.
The
The
weather.
weather. Yeah, that's another source of error. Because again, they're making a prediction based on a model, and their challenges are just as complex as ours. But then we're taking their model output and running it through a model. Any other ones that folks can think of? There is a little overlap between the other three sorts of disagreement.
A couple
Fuel
things in the
typing.
chat. One in the chat is no suppression, so free burning.
Yeah.
Fuels data is not accurate, and fuel grid. So those are good
That's
ones
a big
too.
one.
Fuel type does not align with benchmark.
And I heard somebody speak up there. No?
One more from the chat. Our FWI values are correct. So these are other assumptions. Impacts of regional smoke, fire smoke.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so the first one sort of ties back to the, so we have the assumptions that are associated with the model. So what's included in that data set that the model is based on? And what were the range of conditions that model used? So if that model, and well, I'm good. Like and it's like if you look in the red book, it's like if the FFMC is greater than 94 or greater, there's this error of margin. So because now, or if you have winds greater than 50, sustained winds greater than 50 kph, that's sort of out of the scope of the model, right? So you can bet that that's going to cause some issues with you trying to run the model. The other one, and somebody, and I see, I as an example, assumptions that underline the model. So when we talk about the FBP system, there are like 9 core assumptions. And when you run through those assumptions, it all, and, you know, I've delivered this is what the Canadian DRS system is to out of country folks. And, you know, that one line where, you know, fuels are uniform and continuous, is constant, the wind is unidirectional. It's like, and that's one of the assumptions. And like, when has any of us ever been on a fire that met that criteria? So again, the assumptions that underline the model are another complicating factor. And then the last one, so the assumptions associated with the forecast. And so, and again, this is just an example. So the weather is certainly one. That's like, if they forecast that the low RH is going to be 25 and it turns out to be 15, that's a very different day. So that can be a source of error. Or, you know, if you get a fire perimeter, but the fire perimeter is 12 hours old, you know, is that still where the fire is? So there's a lot of pieces like that, a lot of those inputs that are another source of error. Geez, it really seems like an uphill climb, this fire behavior prediction. It's like not a lot working in our favor. So here's another quote, another Australian researcher. And this really highlights the crux of our job, right? Like, fire behavior prediction absolutely is a challenge. It's difficult, and a lot hangs on your forecast. You know, we might be evacuating communities. We might be evacuating facilities. We might be pulling firefighters off the line. We might completely change our tactics. So there's a lot that rests on your forecast, and it's not all on you, but certainly the information that you provide has a really big impact. So some people talk a little bit about, well, I'm going to do worst case scenario, because then, you know, then I'll never, my fire will never run into the community. And that's great, because yeah, it'll never run into the community, but then people are going to stop believing you. They're going to stop trusting in your predictions, because it's like, oh, like, you know, they always forecast that it's going to go over the hill and it never happens. So it's a really fine balance between, you don't want to underestimate because there are huge consequences, but then you don't want to overestimate, because then that erodes people's confidence in you and in your work. So it's a fine line for sure. So and I think I'm pretty sure this is the last slide. And this speaks back to Marty's flowchart. Yeah, the prediction accuracy is really going to be, it's going to be based on your knowledge, your skill, and your experience. And the one thing to be cautious of, or you really need to be, you really have to do a self-assessment. You have to be really self-aware in terms of, it's not just that you do a prediction and then you're on to the next day and you're on to the next day. It's not always about forecasting forward. You also have to go back and look at what you did. You have to essentially do an after action review of your prediction. So, you know, this is what I said was going to happen. This is what actually happened. Why? And then what will I do different the next time? And I know that when Dana delivered this presentation in 2021, his big thing was, you know, my projection on day one on an incident is probably out to lunch. You know, it's because my situational awareness isn't great. I'm just putting something out there. until I get my boots under me. But by day 14, it better be pretty spot on. You know, if every day I should be improving my projections, I should be improving my predictions. And the idea is, and the graphic on the slide is really, really important. It highlights the idea that good predictions can have bad outcomes. So again, if for whatever reason the RH drops out of something, you get a big wind push, you know, your fire develops a convection column, and that's again out of scope for the FBP system. So you could have a really good prediction and still have a bad outcome. But you can have a bad prediction with a good outcome. So just because things didn't go off the rails doesn't necessarily mean that you got it right. So you always want to make sure that you go back and you're doing that validation. So it's like, okay, you know, the codes are right. Yeah, the weather has been spot on. But if you've been watching your weather and your forecaster has been overestimating the winds every day by 10 kph, well, then pick up the phone and talk to your forecaster. Have that conversation. Maybe he's not familiar with the microclimate in the area that you're working with, or whatever local topographical influences there are. So have that conversation, because it's not on the weather forecaster. If you're not communicating with them, they're not going to get better. And it's the same way that you should also be communicating with fire line staff, with ops staff, to say, okay, is this what you need? Is this right? Am I getting it right? So always looking for that feedback. And then the last piece, and somebody had talked about it when I asked the question earlier, is this idea of bias. When you're doing projections, also being aware of what your personal bias is. Like, are you one to, okay, well, I'm just gonna jump in. I don't have all the information, but I'm just gonna jump in and start working. Or, I'm just gonna shortcut it. So rather than, do a projection for the fuel type changes on the landscape, I'm just gonna call it all C2 because that's the worst fuel type. Do I have a tendency to shortcut? Or, am I overconfident? It's like, oh yeah, I've got this. I've seen this before. I don't need to go back and look at, whether or not I was accurate. I know I'm accurate. So there's all these, being self-aware is really important, because that will have an impact on your predictions. And just for folks, almost all the material from this presentation came from this one article in the Fire Management Today. And again, it's a Marty paper, but it's a good paper, and it's sort of that idea of, okay, these are all the things that you should be thinking about, all the things that are going to influence and impact your predictions. Okay, so does anybody have any comments, questions? Is everyone ready to get in there and start talking fire behavior?
Tanya, is that article available in Canvas by chance?
Nope, but I can, maybe. I'll check. If it's not there, I'll put it in the references.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any comments, questions? All right, well, we took almost the whole time, so look at that. Any comments or questions from the cadre? Because otherwise I think I'm going to cut these guys loose, because they have a couple of discussions to get to if they haven't already. All right, so I'm just going to have a quick look for tomorrow. So tomorrow we begin in earnest. Oh, no, I spoke at a turn. Thursday we begin in earnest. And that will be with Scott. But there is also an assignment that is due on Thursday at 11 o'clock. So you're probably going to want to get after that sort of tomorrow.
Tanya, do you have any expectation that there will be an office hours session tomorrow? Like, is there anything to You want to have that just to have an open discussion kind of forum?
Yeah, I'll be on the office hours, but because we didn't really have a presentation today, we didn't have a keynote. I don't know that anyone else needs to, and mostly I'll be there as a check for, I couldn't get onto something, I couldn't find something. So this is just working out some of the kinks. All right, so if nobody has anything else, then I will cut you folks loose. And yeah, maybe we'll talk tomorrow. I will be looking for, and don't forget, those 2 assignments have to be done today. And that your first assignment is due 11 o'clock on Thursday morning. All right. We'll talk to you later, folks.
Thanks, Tanya. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye, folks.
Have a good night.